currently pursuing a Master of Computational Science at the same university. He is going to talk about Linux.
Thank you. Right, so the talk is titled GNU Linux Coming to a Phone Near You, Maemo Leste. And let's see, some of the talk is going to be technical at the start for maybe 5 to 10 minutes, and then it will be not so technical, more about showing what we did and what we have. So if you're not very technical, just give it a couple minutes. So I'm going to explain what Maemo Leste is and why we're doing it. I'm going to give you a brief history of the project and how we got here in the first place. I'll give an overview of the different components of the OS, which is the kind of technical part. We'll give a current status update, show what it currently looks like, what works, what doesn't work, and some other news. I'll lay down what we want to go for in the future, what milestones we still need to reach, and hopefully how you and everyone else can help and participate. I gave a talk about this project last year at OpenFest, and it was a pretty small talk about, we basically just started out. I wanted to show what we were doing, and now we got a lot further. So there's a couple slides in talk that will be the same as the one last year, but it's mostly different. Okay, so what is Maemo Leste? The talk is specifically about GNU/Linux, which typically means Linux as in the kernel and GNU as in the operating system itself. So if you listen to Salman talk about this, you'll keep repeating that. And Android is also Linux, but it's not GNU/Linux. It's Linux with a lot of other Java stuff on top of it. So when I say GNU/Linux, I mean you take a GNU Linux distribution like Debian and you make it work on your phone. And Maemo Leste is a mobile phone OS for phones and tablets. So smartphones, some tablets work, and it's based on Debian, which is you might not be familiar with, but it's pretty much Debian but without systemd. So we replace some parts of Debian that we don't like. We might just switch to Debian at some point, but currently we're using Debian. And we're going to go to the current Debian stable soon. So Debian stretches, Debian old stable, and Debian Buster is stable. So we really have to switch so we get newer software from Debian. But we mostly don't maintain anything. We just get whatever Debian does for us and add the packages on top of it. And one thing we really care about is everything that runs on your device that runs Maemo Leste has to be mainline Linux. It has to come directly from upstream from the developers that work on Linux, not from a company that releases one version and then doesn't do anything with it for 5 years. So you see that most Android phones, they run Linux 3.4, 3.18, or 4.4, and they just never get a newer version at all because the company decides that they just going to build a new phone and then they don't care about the old one anymore. And we also really care about the Linux experience, so that means you get to do whatever you want. You can hack around as much as you want. If you want the latest cool VPN in the kernel, WireGuard, you can just install it. If you want to use Betterfest as a different file system, you can just do that. And it's up to you. And it's currently in the alpha stage. Last year we were in the pre-alpha stage, so we moved to the alpha stage now. So I've kind of covered this, but why are we working on Maemo Leste? There's a need for a mobile operating system for people who really care about free software. There's a couple that people have tried, and there's still a couple around. Yola is a very prominent one, but it's actually not open source. It came from Maemo, and then Yola made a lot of things open source, but everything in UI is not open source, even though they promised they would open source it whenever they started the company many years ago. They still haven't. I'm personally very tired of Android, other OSs, and people promising they'd open source it and they don't. It's supposed to be open, hackable, not locked down, and we want to see that you can take a device, if it's old or a new phone, you can make it work on Linux mainline and just support it the way you're supposed to do. Even Google can't do it, right? They have so many phones and still none of their phones have mainline Linux support. They just go to 4.4 or whatever kernel they decide they want to support for a while. And everything is done by the community, so there's no company backing or anything. It's just done in our spare time. Okay, so a bit of history. Maemo was originally made by Nokia, and they've been doing it for, a very long time. I think the phone I'm currently using is almost 10 years old. Maybe it's already 10 years old. And before that, so those the Nokia N100, and before that they had Nokia N770, 800, 810, and they all ran different versions of Maemo. And the version that I'm still using is called Maemo Fermantle, 5, and it is also based on Linux and on Debian, so it was a very good candidate to port to the new universe, so to say. And only some parts of Maemo made by Nokia are open source, but it was pretty big at the time, so they sold millions of devices, a lot of people used it, and then Android and iOS came and it kind of died off, unfortunately. But it's still branded as the hacker OS, the hacker phone. Like if you wanted to have a radio transmitter in your phone, you can just do it. You put your phone in your car, transmit over radio, and you can listen to whatever your phone is doing on the radio instead of what the radio is broadcasting to your car, or that kind of cool stuff. If you wanted to route audio through your laptop to your phone over radio to the car, you can do that too. It's still maintained kind of by the community, so there's still security updates sometimes, and they're still working on opening up more software. And there's some links about the openness of Maemo Fermental. So Fermental is the code name for Maemo 5, and it's the name of a wind, and Maemo 4 and 3 were also called some kind of wind, so we picked Leste, which is also a wind. So the idea is Maemo Fermental was a successful operating system, even though it never, Nokia stopped making phones for a long time. But it was a proven OS. A lot of the APIs are just fine. They're working okay. And there's a big set of applications that people built around Fermental 10 years ago, and some of them still work. There's still map applications, public transport applications. Applications to learn languages, that kind of stuff. It's all still there, and basically we just need to take that source code, recompile it, and it'll work on Maemo Leste. So the idea is we have Maemo Fermental from Nokia. It was a very big project, had a lot of people working on it. Let's take whatever is open and just port it, whatever is closed, rewrite it, and then keep the APIs the same so that we can leverage all the other applications that people wrote to just bring them to Maemo Leste. All right, this is a very long list of different components of Maemo Leste. These are all the main 4 ones, and actually a big part of it is shared with Yola, Selfish OS. So some of the parts that they open sourced are also here, and they kept working on some of these programs, others they stopped using. So MC is the mode control entity, so if you have your phone and you tilt it, it will detect that the accelerometer decides that your phone has changed, or if you open the keyboard, it will unlock your phone. If you close the keyboard, it will lock the phone again. It will turn off the keyboard lights. It will make your light blink or not. DSME is basically a program that runs or Maemo services, a little bit like systemd. So it will restart them when they crash, that kind of stuff. ICD2 is the connectivity daemon, so it's like network manager on Linux. It will manage your wireless connectivity, your USB network, your 2G, LTE, whatever connection, and it's written with power savings in mind, so it has features to only scan every 15 minutes, or only every half an hour, or only activate when an application actually wants to use the internet rather than always have it on. And if you have a phone, you don't want the radio to always be, active for data, because then it will drain the battery very quickly. There's daemons to receive events from the kernel if you're plugging in cables or something else is happening. Clock and alarm D are for clock and alarm, obviously. Nokia has a very nice feature that I think we can make work on other phones too, where basically you can, even when it's completely turned off, you can still wake up the phone using the RTC. So if you set an alarm at 7 a.m., you can completely turn off your phone, and the real-time clock will wake the phone up at 7 a.m. The phone will boot, and then will wake you up when you're asleep. Hilton Framework is the main UI frameworks for Maemo. So it contains different dialogues that work well on mobile. It contains patches to GTK and Qt to make it look better on mobile interfaces. So GTK and Qt are the widget sets, the libraries that you use to build user interfaces on Linux. Hilton Desktop and Hilton Home are the window manager and the main UI. So if you're using that kind of components you're dealing with, we have the same input method framework that Nokia had, so you can have all the kind of different keyboard layouts that you want, so it's super easy to switch from Bulgarian phonetic keyboard layout to English in like one button that just works really well. And PyMaemo is an interface to Maemo from Python, so pretty much everything that's available from C, you can just do in Python, so it makes it a lot easier to write applications. And all of these tools existed already on Maemo for Mantle, but most of them relied on old interfaces from the kernel that were okay 10 years ago, but now they don't exist anymore, or they relied on other programs that were pulled 10 years ago, but Red Hat abandoned them and now they don't exist anymore. So a lot of this has been ported to what Linux now uses these days. So we use dbus, that's still the same communication, gconf for settings, UDAT for all the kernel events, if there's anything happening, if there are drivers being loaded or if the cable's being plugged, we use that backend to figure out what's happening. All the input events has been ported to the newer interfaces. We still use Pulse Audio, and UPower and UDisks are also new interfaces for basically the same thing. What is the capacity of my battery? How many batteries do you have? Is it charging? Is it discharging? Is it the critical capacity? And then wireless is WP supplement, or Phono is what Intel and Nokia built together for open source calls, text, and data. So if you're dealing with the modem, you always use a Phono, and they offer an interface that we then use in our tools. LIRCD is for infrared, BlueZ, and Bluetooth is for Bluetooth connectivity. So all of this is, you know, if you can install in your Debian or your Ubuntu distribution, it will be there, and we just interface with the same things, and hopefully build a nice UI around it that you can use on mobile phones. So really, the device on Maemo Leste is just a device running Debian. So to port the older code, we had to replace old packages like HAL with UDAT, UPower, UDisks, input devices, and we had to port a lot of the old widget sets and new widget sets. So GTK2, we had to port GTK3, Qt4 to Qt5, and there's GTK4 upcoming at some point. And there's a lot of drivers for phones with specific graphics drivers that are hard to make work, and that took a lot of this time a lot of time this year to make it all work with like the Nokia 111 devices. And all our code is hosted on GitHub, and we automatically build everything that we can make. We automatically build it on our infrastructure using Jenkins, and it automatically ends up in our Debian repository of packages. So if you're on Debian, you can actually just add a repository to your apt list and install whatever you want. It's probably going to turn out very well if you're on a laptop, but you know, you can do it. Okay, so Spine is a virtual keyboard, so a lot of phones no longer have a physical keyboard, so you need a virtual keyboard, and you don't have that as well. But that works. Wireless works just fine, so if you have a phone that runs Linux and Linux supports wireless, you can use our UIs and it should work fine. It actually supports more than some of the phones currently support when it comes to security on wireless. Connected to the cellular network works if your modem is supported, if Linux supports the modem, and if Phono supports the modem, which is the case for most of them now. And it's still work in progress, so if you have a SIM card in there, it will allow you to unlock the SIM card. It will tell you what network you're connected to, 2G, 3G, LTE. It will tell you what the operator name is. It will automatically figure out what the network name is supposed to be, and probably in 1 or 2 weeks when you click a button, it will actually connect you to the data network. Audio usually just works fine. You can charge the device, no problem. Basic browsing works. Browsing is a bit of a difficult point because very powerful modern browsers require a lot of resources, so we have a browser that supports most of the things it needs to support, but not a lot more. You can also just run Firefox on there. You can just install it from Debian, and you have Firefox on your phone, but it's not the most usable experience because it will look like on the desktop. And USB peripherals on the go, host model just works. So usually when I boot my phone, when I'm developing, I just put the phone, connect the USB cable, and I'll automatically get a USB interface on my machine, and I can just log in over SSH to my device and do whatever development I want. We also have a wiki page with the current status. The things that we're currently really working on, and I think once that's done, we'll have a beta release for several devices, is more of Phono integration. So we can, on several devices, make calls from the command line, establish calls, actually reroute the audio, but you know, if there's no UI for it, then we can maybe make the phone vibrate, but if you have to type something while you're, I know, biking around in a car, it doesn't work, you can't pick up the phone. And there's some other UIs to finished for cellular data, but it's getting pretty close. And then the next parts will be, okay, now we can actually make phone calls with the dialer, but if someone sends you a text, you want it to render somewhere nice and have the history in there. And Nokia had all of this, but unfortunately they never made it open source. So this part is something we have to either rebuild or reverse engineer somehow, or find another library that kind of does the same thing that we can reuse. I think Qt has some personal information management stuff that we might end up using. 3D acceleration is so much better than last year. There's more devices that now work well, and actually, if you don't have any 3D acceleration, the entire UI is so slow because it's rendered on the CPU and you basically can't use it. So it's a very frustrating experience. But it's gotten much better, mostly through the work of people in the community who don't just work on Maemo Leste, but on Linux in general or on another mobile system. And it's very promising, actually. And camera support is something we don't yet support, but I think once the drivers are there, I'm not very worried. It shouldn't be super hard. Okay, so I prepared some screenshots because last year was a very boring technical talk, and I'm trying to now no longer go with the technical stuff and move to show you something that, what it looks like and how it actually works. And if time permits, at the end of the talk, we can go to the speaker room and I have a couple devices I can show off, and you can use it. So this is kind of hard with this light. Okay. Okay, so this is the wireless UI. So if you go to the status bar, you can select wireless networks, and it will show you a list of all the different networks and the one you're connected to. So this is at the office of the Internet Archive in San Francisco. It's a little better. So it shows you that it's connected. It's an open network. This is my T-Mobile SIM card in there, so it shows me that I can use that to connect to the data network. And there's some other random APs that I don't know or don't use. Or don't know the password to. Then another thing, this looks very similar, but it was actually a big milestone for me at the time when working on porting the wireless framework to the new WPS Optica framework, is that WPA EAP works. So if you're at a university and they require you to have like this intermediate certificate, and it has to, check with one of their servers to verify your identity rather than set a simple password. All that stuff works. And there's actually a lot of devices where it doesn't work pretty well, and I was happy to see that this just works. So when I go to my university, I can just connect to the network using my credentials. This is a UI to manage all the different networks. So if I want to go to a specific network, I can just change the password or change the name or whatever. And this shows you that you can search every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes, connect automatically to Wi-Fi when it's there or not. This is the drop-down menu from the home application, so you can get the battery status overview. You can set the phone to be silent or not. It shows you currently USB cable is connected and set the charging mode only instead of a network or mass storage. It shows you it's connected to a wireless network, so I made this screenshot just before the talk. So I connected to the OpenFest network, and that was just painless. This is the system menu, so you can turn it off or switch to general mode and the current path, that kind of stuff. Or airplane mode if you enter an airplane. This is the current desktop, so if you open your phone, this is usually what it looks like. So you have a home screen where you can have application launchers, much like modern phones, except that you can arrange it any way you want. You can have widgets or calendar widgets on there. Thank you, that's much better. And it's currently connected to a 3G network. The battery is kind of full, and it's on Wi-Fi with a signal strength of about 4 out of, I think, 7 or 8. And it's connected to the KPN network in the Netherlands at the time. This is a task overview, so this is a terminal open and you can send notifications. So if someone sends you an SMS or a text, you want to see that. So usually what happens is you'll get a window that says something is happening and the LED on the phone will start blinking and it will start vibrating and like a normal device should. Notifications are looking like this. So if you are charging or discharging or if there's something else going on, you'll just get a notification and it will go away again. This is the lock screen, and this is the actual application menu. So if you hit the button on the left top corner over there, the 6 squares, then you get an application launcher. And these are some things that are already working. Some things I just installed straight from Debian, and then you just start them and they kind of work. Others are ported specifically from the old Nokia Maemo. So for example, Dr. Nuck's SNES is a SNES emulator. So Dr. Nuck's SNES is a SNES emulator, and you can play SNES games or maybe even Game Boy games. Ikigai is a voice over IP application that works on the desktop, but actually kind of works on Maemo Parental as well. GNOME Music Player is something you can use to control your music players. You might know VLC, there's terminal and settings. We definitely have some more work to do to add more applications to the entire thing. This is settings UI, so there's the display. You can change the brightness, change how long the display stays on, or if it should not go on at all on certain events. Text input allows you to change the keyboard layouts. Notification lights will allow you to program the RGB LEDs on the phone, so you can basically customize it, make your own light patterns, that's your kind of thing. Internet connections is for data and Wi-Fi, I already showed that. Phone will allow you to configure your phone, change the pin, set up call forwarding, stuff like that. That's still work in progress. On the latest build, it shows up and you can kind of move around, but it doesn't do everything yet. And there's going to be more settings applets in the future. This is obviously a terminal. It's a recent screenshot because there's also a clock there now. This is me logging into my home server using RC, apparently in the Free Pascal channel. And this is where you can change the terminals, you can change the font, give it different colors, that kind of stuff. Browsing works, so I think this is NetSurf. So this is just from the Debian repo. I loaded up our own page. Scroll bars are kind of iffy, but it kind of works. And note that this is not something we built, this is just a standard GTK application. So you just install it, and then our GTK team will make it kind of usable or renderable. So if you would click on the URL bar, the virtual keyboard would just pop up, even though that application was never designed to do that. But because we have GTK patches that basically for every text input field pop up a virtual keyboard, you can actually use it without a keyboard. And this is true for a lot of applications. So this is what the virtual keyboard looks like on English setting. I should probably include some other layouts and screenshots. And you know, if you have a phone with a keyboard attached, then if you use the virtual keyboard, it will only give you special symbols that are not already on your physical keyboard, depending on whether you have your phone open or not. So it's kind of clever about that. This is the emulator I mentioned before. There's still some work to do to make it work on ARM, but it works in the virtual machines. And someone else ported other games, so my own game from the Maemo Leste now works. You can play a game and finish it. Marbles, which is a puzzle game, kind of works. And of course, Doom. Which is when 3D started working. I can download it later after the talk as well. And this is the GNOME Music Player, so if you use the music player daemon at home, you can just connect over your Wi-Fi and change the music that's playing on your server. This is just whatever came up when I started it. As a first start assistant, like you go through dialogues, fill in this kind of stuff. And again, this is just in Debian. It's not something we made or changed the looks of. It's just whatever the GTK theme is. And this is kind of funky. And this is Ikigai, so it's a soft phone application. I actually installed it this morning, and I was surprised at how well it works. Because it's built for desktop, but I can basically connect to my voice over IP home line, and I can call people and it will ring and work. So the modem calls don't fully work yet, but you can call over IP. And you know, this is me picking up a call and linking up my mobile phone number because the presentation was online. Some other big news for us is that we applied for funding. A couple months ago, we submitted a proposal to a Dutch organization called NLNet. It's very readable on the slides. And they're a foundation, and they regularly receive donations, and they spend that on open source projects, security-focused projects, privacy-focused projects, and I think they also funded the original GPL copyright license, or copyleft license. So they've been exists for a long time, and 2 days ago they told us that they actually accepted our request. So we're going to get some money from them, and hopefully we'll figure out how exactly we're going to spend it. We submitted some ideas to them, like here's what we can do all these things, and then they'll pick some of them, and then if we do those things, they can give us some money. And hopefully they can also sponsor extra hardware, so more devices that we can give to people who are enthusiastic about it, then they can help us out. Okay, so there's a couple of devices that are currently being supported. I'm starting with what I think is the most exciting one. It's called the PinePhone. How many of you have heard of the PinePhone? Okay, it's like 1/3 or half, that's pretty cool. So the PinePhone is made by a company called Pine64, and they've been making single board computers for quite a while. If you're familiar with a company called Olimex, I think the CEO is actually here. They do very similar things. They build these small computers with HDMI and USB and Ethernet, and you can just use them as a small server at home or as your multimedia station. Pine64 did the same thing, but they decided to also make a phone. So they took the same computer that's on their single board computer, and they decided to plug it in the phone. And we're going to find out if it's a good idea or not, but they're really pushing very hard. So a couple, in March or April, I think, they sent me a development kit. I have it with me in my bag, I can show it later. It's very big and bulky, but it was basically a prototype of a phone. And only last week, 2 weeks ago, they sent me the actual prototype of the phone. So they're going to production soon, except that I left the country where they shipped it to just a day before it actually arrived, so I don't have it here, but I'll have it in a couple weeks. But the exciting thing is it's going to be super cheap. It'll be $100 to $150, I think. Don't pin me on that. I'm sure they're going to announce an actual price, but as far as like open source phones go, that's really cheap. As a comparison, I think the Libra M5 phone is $600 or $800, and they're not really making them yet. So that's cool, and the other cool thing is that the computer that they use on the single board computers that Olimex also uses is actually really well supported on Linux. So for years people have been making that work, which means that you actually don't have to do a whole lot of work when you have a phone using that computer. And it's in this case an all-winner with double L A64 chip, and I think the current version that we have is Linux 5.3 plus some patches to make the display work, to make the modem come up, to make the accelerometer work, make the front camera work, those kind of things. And to be clear, this is not just me messing around with it because I've contributed some of it, but there's a lot of people in Europe, in the US, and Asia making this phone work and doing a lot of driver development, and they all got similar development kits, and it's been really fun working with them. The other cool thing is that the PinePhone is actually pretty good for privacy. So one of the features they have is to have a hardware switch or several switches you can turn on and off for the modem. So if you want to turn off the modem and you don't want the modem to ever be powered, you can just do that, and then the modem's gone. Same is true for the microphones. If you want your modem on but you don't want it to be listening at all times, you can do that too. And the same is true for Wi-Fi. Another really cool thing that they did is that the modem is on USB. So, just these kind of lines. And the big thing about that is that that's not true for most phones. For most phones, the modem is directly connected to the computer. And usually the modem is actually directly connected to the computer to a way that it can read any memory page in your phone. So whatever is currently being displayed on your phone, whatever you're doing, the modem can just read it. And the modem is a black box that shouldn't be trusted from a privacy or security point of view. So by putting the modem on USB, there's no way to access the memory directly. So the modem has to go to a specific interface, and as far as we know, there's no easy way to get any data from your phone that way. There's a couple other devices that did this, but I think any phone that was mass-produced, I think including the 100, doesn't do this. And the awesome part is that the 3D acceleration just kind of works. It's been a long time coming. 6 or 7 years ago in FOSDEM, someone announced they're working on a driver, and they stopped working on it, and then someone else started working on it, and a lot of people working on it, and it's working. So I have a video somewhere where we have our UI working with this open source driver. And like I said, there's a lot of people working on it, it's super cheap. You can find full specifications on pine64.org/pinephone, and I think they're planning on shipping it somewhere in January, or maybe February. So everyone who wants to buy one. So this is what the development kit looks like. It's kind of big and bulky with an expansion for the modem. But it works, and Pine64 is also planning to support other mobile operating systems, so there's a couple other ones out there. There's UB ports, which came from Ubuntu. Ubuntu did a phone for a while, didn't work, or it worked, but it wasn't feasible for them, so they stopped working on it, and some people picked up their work. And I think that's actually the most mature mobile phone OS you can find. And Postmarket OS is a mobile phone operating system that tries to make it work on all the different phones out there. So the idea is if you have a phone and it's no longer supported by Samsung or someone else, their thing will run on your phone. But that means you'll be using an old kernel and some old software parts and non-free stuff, but you know, they've been really good at supporting devices. And hopefully if we do our work right, you can get the Pine phone with Maemo Leste pre-installed as an option. And they're actually also making a tablet. So I actually got the tablet before I got their phone prototype. I have the tablet with me. It's not running ROS yet because the phone was more interesting than the tablet. But I can show it to you if you want after the presentation again. And I'm not sure when they're shipping them. Maybe you can already get them. But it's again the same hardware, the same computer in there. Okay. So I've mentioned this device a lot. This is the Nokia 900. It was produced over 10 years ago. You can still find them second-hand, refurbished-ish, but they're not cheap. It's still like €100. But they're, specification-wise, they're not good. They're 250 megabytes of RAM. Most phones nowadays come with 2 or 4 gigabytes of RAM, maybe more. And it's a single-core CPU, 600 megahertz. So the fact that you can take a modern Debian distribution, run it on there, have smooth 3D acceleration, and still kind of be able to do whatever you want is amazing to me. And I think that also kind of speaks to how cool the phone is. The current work that we have needs more power management work, so on this battery I get like 8 or 16 hours on a good battery. If the modem is not powered on all the time, if the modem is on, it's a couple hours. And that's fixable, right? Because the Nokia 5 operating system I still use as a daily driver, it lasts for a week if I don't use it a lot, which is weird for the fact that that's such a small battery. It runs various recent Linux kernel with 3D driver patches and it's actually super smooth. Wireless works, the battery works, touchscreen works, keyboard works, USB works, audio works, the modem works. We just need a UI for it. This is the Motorola Droid 4. I also mentioned this device last year, but there's been a lot of things that have been changing here. So this is a device that was only made in the US. And it was SIM-locked to Verizon, which means if you're not on a Verizon contract, you can't use the device at all. It's just useless. It works, but you have no connectivity. And that's still true, except that if you take it outside of the US, it works. So in Europe, you can do whatever you want with it. And they're becoming super cheap. You can buy them for like $15 on eBay. And they're faster. They have 1 gigabyte of RAM, 2 cores at 1 gigahertz, so it's like the 900, but better. There's still some 3D acceleration stuff to figure out. We're actually making a lot of progress on it now in the last couple of weeks. So hopefully, within a month, the 3D acceleration will work just as well as on the 900, and it will be a usable device. Without 3D acceleration, you get very frustrated very quickly. And basically everything works. So even the modem phone calls work. I met up with a friend last week in San Francisco who's been working on this device for 4 or 5 years. Not by himself, with just a couple people, and they actually made it work really well. And he's doing SMS using Perl scripts that's converted to a mailbox format that he then reads in his email client, and he replies and does something weird. So he has his own window manager-based operating system, but it's working, and I think that's battery life a couple of days, which I think is a tablet that I bought in a store in Sofia here. I think it was 80 left. And with not that much work, we made the UI just run on it. So again, it was all winter-based, slightly different version. And 3D acceleration works, wireless battery, touchscreen, it all works. And again, this is work done by so many people to build all the drivers and make it work. But it was surprisingly easy now to just pick up a random tablet and make it work. If you have a Raspberry Pi 2 or higher, you can also run our Maemo Leste OS. I just put it on the SD card and it will boot. 3D acceleration will work, Wi-Fi will work, but it doesn't have a modem, so as far as the phone goes, it's not super interesting. But if you want to set up other things, it works. And actually at home I have a screen this size of Full HD with touchscreen. And it's a super nice way to test the UI and play with it. All the development that I think everyone works on the OS does is in a virtual machine. So you can build software on the 900, and I've done it, but you end up waiting a long time. And using VirtualBox or VMware or QEMU, you can just take our Intel image and run it in a virtual machine in like 5 to 10 minutes. And if you're little experienced, you can take a USB Wi-Fi dongle or a USB modem and just pass it through. So on my machine I actually have a modem integrated that automatically gets passed through the modem. So I can just test it like it's a real phone, except that the microphone line is not wired up, but everything else works, so I can test most of my modem stuff here. Okay, so for the future, the main milestones that we still want to reach, my personal favorite one is dog fooding, so what I really want to do is to stop using this device and start using this device, which is the same hardware, but with Maemo Leste instead of Maemo Fermento on it. So I want this to become my primary phone, and if I actually need to call people, it should just work. And if it doesn't work, I'll try to fix it, and other people can try to fix it until it works. So that will be the big milestone. I'm hoping that we can get more people involved to take packages that were previously made and port them to our OS, and we can package them. Very soon, I hope we can make an alpha release for the Pine phone, because if they're going to sell and they're going to sell pretty cheap, it might be a very good way to get people involved. If they can get it pre-installed with our OS, they might get super excited, or not. But they'll be able to swap it out. And we're going to hopefully make better releases for the M100 Androids as soon as we have some kind of usable UI for phone calls. Which again is kind of the same as the first point. There's still more work to be done to take the more modern widget sets, so QD5 and GTK3, they need more patches to look the same and work well. So some of this stuff I showed you was GTK2, and because we have our own extra widgets and styles for that, it just kind of renders okay, and you can take normal applications and run them. That's not true for GTK3 and QD5, which is what more people start using now. So we have to work on making that work as well. There's a lot of other stuff that we want to do, but nothing that jumped to mind right now. In general, we hope we can involve more people and basically whatever you want to do with the device. I was super surprised that I could just take it and then install WireGuard from a Debian repo. It would automatically start building the module on my phone, and when I drove it, actually just worked. That was super surprising to me. I mean, it's supposed to work, but still. And hopefully in the very near future we can have mainline Linux, so the latest kernel from Linus Torvalds himself, without any patches on top, so it will just work and you don't have to patch anything. Full disk encryption is definitely something I want to work on. It's not something we currently have, but we need to just figure out what ends up being on the small image that's not encrypted that you use to decrypt everything else. And a better browser is definitely on the roadmap, and getting Android emulation working will be super nice. The reason I haven't done much of it is because the Nokia N100 is not powerful enough to emulate Android, but maybe with the Pine phone, it will be way easier to test that kind of emulation. There's a project called Nbox that does this, so they make an Android container and just run from there, and supposedly it should just work. Yeah, so we're currently in the alpha stage. We'll go for the beta when we can make calls. Hopefully we can move to the newer Debian version soon, and really having just a phone with apps and being able to install whatever you want is super cool. I've also done Wireshark on my phone and just kind of mess around with it, it's fun. There's some devices that work, they're not super expensive anymore, and we just need a lot more people to help out. Like I'm trying to document and keep the wiki tidy, but if you're also writing code and doing other things, it's very hard to keep that up. And so I'm hoping that we can find more people to help out. These are the resources, so here's our website, our wiki, all the source code is there. Again, everything is open source, so there's no closed source code there. IRC, a mailing list, and there's also the Maemo community where you can go to the forum and interact with people who've used this device for a long time or might be new time users. So this is about it. I want to say a special thanks to Ivailo because he's done so much work. He lives in Sofia and if you're as excited as I am, I'm going to do a demo in the speakers room after the talk, and you can pick on one of these. I can show you my virtual machine with a modem. I can show you voice over IP calls that kind of work. I can show you that you can send the text using a not very useful UI, but it works. So I can send the text from my laptop to my phone or to another phone, and that works. You can try that. I have a Maemo Leste Nokia here, so you can mess with that if you want, or break it. At least the software, not the hardware. There's some Droid Force I have with me, but again, they don't have their 3D version, so I can show you that the UI comes up and it works, but it's not fast. I have the PinePhone development kit, not prototype with me, but last week in a bar I put the battery in the wrong way, so plus and minus became minus and plus, and some smoke came out, so I can still show you the device, but I can't boot it up right now. I need to replace one part. Thank you very much.
Hi, I have a ton of questions, but I just want to ask you one now. How this project, Maemo Leste, is compared to the Pure OS for Libre phones? Do you think, I mean, it seems like you have a lot of work to do and you are basing your work, your project on a previous project for phones developed by a big company, and you are based on Dev 1. Maybe that's a decision because other developers of Dev 1 are in Netherlands, or maybe because of System D stuff. And Maemo, the original Maemo was based on Init as well. I don't know.
Upstart, yeah.
Yeah, if that makes any sense. But I'm just wondering if you think that Pure based on Debian for Libre phones can achieve their goals, since you're doing a lot of work on this project based on Nokia's Maemo. Thanks.
So there's a couple of questions there, I think. The first one I want to quickly tackle is that we use Dev 1, but it's probably only a couple of days of work to make it work with Debian. And with System D, we just never bothered because it's not worth it to us. And your questions were, I think, twofold. Otherwise, do you think we can get something to work because they have so many people working on it? And the question is, do I think that they can make it work? So do I think the Pure OS can make it work? And it's definitely a big project, and we've been working on it for a year and a half, maybe almost 2 years, and we're getting to the point where we can kind of use it. I'm not sure if we'll have 1 million users in a couple of years from now, but if I can use it and a couple of my friends can use it, and maybe some people here can use it and are happy with it, that will be good enough for me. I'm not trying to overtake the market. On the other hand, I'm hoping that the Pure OS people can get their device out and can make it work. There's been recently some signs that it's not going very well. There's some blog posts about how they're out of money and the devices are way too warm and they're trying to think of adding a fan to their phone in your pocket. I hope to make it work because they have a lot of people, and if they can just make the software work, then we can take the PinePhone and run that software, right? But there's a lot of stuff we still have to see. They wrote that they did a lot, but I haven't seen that much of it yet. And our stuff is here, and we're trying to be humble about it, and hope that we can get people to use it. Ultimately, if they succeed, I might be happy to switch over. But until then, there's no other OS that allows you to just hack around with it and make it work for hackers. Hope that kind of answers your question.
I think please be humble, but I think what you're doing is really cool. I like the idea of having Linux in my pocket on my phone. I was wondering, just how many people are you? This seems like a lot of work, and you guys are putting in, just what's the size of your team?
So the people working on just the user space stuff, so nothing in the kernel, no drivers, is 2 or 3 people. And Evito did a lot of work. There's people in the past who did a lot of work, but they're no longer involved. So a lot of people did reverse engineering or rebuilding stuff from scratch for being incremental because they want it to be more open source. And there's a lot of stuff out there that I haven't even covered, like media players and other things. There's a lot more people working on that. I have no idea how many. It could be 10, 20, maybe even more. A couple people who really do a lot of work. And when it comes to the driver development and kernel development, there's a lot of people. They don't just do it for us, they do it for themselves or other devices, but I can't really give you a number, but at least the people that have touched some parts of the Nokia kernel tree for Linux is at least 20, 25, maybe more, and a lot of them are still active in the project. And for a moment we had someone who was super involved for like a month and a half, for 4 or 5 months, and he made 3 considerations work super well, and then he left. He's still around, but he kind of achieved his goal, and he can use the phone for what he wants it to do, and that was it. There's still some friends of mine who were interested, and some other people online. We have like 80 people, I think, 50 to 80 people in the RC channel, and others on the mailing list. So there's definitely people following the progress, but they don't all have time to help out.
I have a two-part question. The first one is, are you aware of the OpenMoko project that was more than 10 years ago? And is it possible to run it on that device? Because I plugged it in a couple months ago and it was still working.
I think you can do it. I think the specs are weaker than the Nokia 900. They're like half of the specs, so it might be a little tricky RAM-wise. But the guys who did that project 10 years ago, they're still working on these devices. So they're still supporting them, so you can still take the most recent Linux and put it out. And if that works, a big part of it will just work. 3D acceleration might be tricky, but the same guy who started that project is still working on making that work well now. And it's actually helping us with the Droid 4 as well. So I think if you want to invest a couple days of time, you might be able to do it. I don't have the device, so I can't do it for you.
I can actually give you the device tomorrow if you want.
I might sit with it for a couple months, but yeah, we can try that.
The second part of the question is there a room for collaboration between your project and what the guys from PureOS are doing? For example, this library, libhandy, that tries to make the already existing UI mobile friendly, and things like that.
That's in part kind of what Hilton also does. So the patches that we have on GTK and Qt, they do the same thing, so it makes it smaller and more compact. I hope that I think there's room for collaboration. I'm not sure if we can use libhandy, but for example, I hope that when they have their phone dialer working and their context application working, and text application, we can just use that. Like if they base it on GTK or Qt, I'd be happy to just see if we can make that work. It would save us a lot of time. And we can get something that kind of works pretty quickly. But so far, I think they've shown one video of starting a call, but that's it. I don't know.
Yeah, so I'm not super familiar with all these projects, so this might be a dumb question for you, but why do you use these old phones? I mean, can you just use a new Android phone and flash it and put your OS as well?
So what would you flash to the Android phone?
Yeah, I mean, what
This project?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's some ways that you can do it, but generally the Android phones are not super well supported, so you end up with a kernel, a Linux kernel from Samsung that they made 5 years ago. You can make your OS run on top of it, but you can't change it. It involves years of work to make it work with the modern Linux. So the reason that I pick these devices is because I know that they work really well, and a lot of people try hard to make it work. That said, there's several people who just took an Android device, put our stuff on top of it, and it worked. I think one of the examples is the Gemini PDA, where they have a keyboard and an phone. People make that work. We're just a little reluctant to support it officially because our goal is to have everything new and you can easily change it and modify it. And if you stick with multi-kernel, it becomes a problem. Also for security, like if something breaks or people, there's a vulnerability in Linux and gets patched in Linux, you need to somehow figure out how you can make their code work with your 4 or 5 year old code. So it becomes, as a maintenance, it's a really big maintenance problem. And if you have a lot of people who want to support their own device, I'd be happy to, if people have a specific phone of Android and they want to support it, sure. We can make community images and as long as they maintain it, we can do that. As far as why I still use this phone, I like the OS that runs on it. It gives me a lot of freedom to do things I still can't really do on Android. And I don't really trust Android. Like the complete open source builds of Android, they're kind of good, but as soon as you want to do something useful with them that I can't do with this phone, like run WhatsApp or run Signal, then I have to pull in a lot of garbage again, and yeah. It was not a dumb question.
I have one question. Did you try running it on FX Tech Pro 1? The new one with physical keyboard.
Yeah, so I think they're making a new phone for Android with the perfect keyboard. I think what they brought it. I think they said they were going to give us one device, but they haven't so far. So if they can try to do it themselves, but so far they haven't given us a device.
Okay.
And they're quite expensive, so I'm not inclined to buy one just to see if I can.
So if you have more questions, you can find Aaron in the speakers room. And I have an announcement. Намерен е малък талон на автомобил Mitsubishi Space Star с регистрация RA4432КВ на Георги Янакиев Георгиев. Ако е в залата, може да го намери в Lost and Found на лицето.
I'm just turning my mouth around. No, thank you.